All right, welcome to the line with Andrew McLean, except it's without Andrew McLean. It's actually with Brian Dawson today. I am Brian Dawson, CEO of 1819 News and host of the 1819 News podcast. And hopefully, you guys are intimately familiar with the work of 1819 News. We are the official news partner of Talk 99.5, the biggest news talk station in the state of Alabama, 100,000 watt blowtorch, raining down good conservative opinions anywhere within that reach of the broadcast. And so we love being partnered with them. Love all the hosts. Just think it's an incredible partnership and really appreciate them. So, at the top of every hour, you will hear the 1819 News with Andrea Tice coming in. That's us. You have April Marie Fogel filling in for Leland and Andrew, and also for uh, Dixon and Vining in the mornings. She is our dedicated investigative journalist, specifically in the realm of education, but all things that need investigating. You get April Marie Fogel on it. And we're at it. We're statewide, state focused news and multimedia company with the express purpose of taking out AL.com as a media outlet of record in the state. And we are well on our way to accomplishing our mission. And so, anyway, I'm going to set the table. We've got 4 hours we're going to be spending together. Obviously, going to dive into Iran because that's the most pressing thing. Want to answer, just kind of give my thoughts on that. Why are we there? Is there a religious requirement for Christians to support the nation state of Israel? Dive into that. Monroe Doctrine versus what we're doing now. All that kind of stuff, and then how it's going. But then I'm bringing on my friend Troy Carrico, who is kind of our military special forces, ops expert at 1819 News, who writes regular op-eds for us. He's going to be coming on at the bottom of the hour at 10:30 to give me his take, and I bet my take is different than his take. And this is his realm of expertise as professional, and he's also a war fighter, and so he probably likes the war more than I do. And so be it. So we'll get both sides of that. Also want to talk. There was recently a New York Times article that was published on yours truly here, Brian Dawson, and it was an overall the war against the Islamification, or really the right and the right's war against the Islamification of America. And so they were talking about how it's going on all over the country, but they really honed in specifically on what's going on right here in Hoover, with I call it the Hoover Caliphate, that's trying to expand their influence and build a bigger school with a mosque and all this other stuff. And that got shut down in Hoover. And so the New York Times basically credited me as the one who like single handedly like did all this community organizing to stop it. And while I'm flattered that the New York Times thinks that I have that firepower, and I guess with 1819 News combined we do, but I wasn't out grassroots organizing and doing all this other stuff. It was the people in Hoover that showed up to put a stop to it. It was Coach Tommy Tuberville, raining down hellfire on all of the things that are going on with. And what do I mean when I say Islamification? We're going to dive into all that. So right now, I'm just setting the table for where we're going. I want to talk about the Turning Point USA tour I've been on, and the college campuses that I've been on. I've had the University of Montevallo. Um, Last week, I was on the University of Alabama at Huntsville. I actually had Representative Ernie Yarborough, who was with me doing a Prove Me Wrong, and he's actually going to be coming on to talk about immigration and his legislation. I could go on and on. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about, and thank God we have 4 hours to talk about it all. Because just in me setting the table for about half the show, I felt like I almost used up one of the hours. So I want to just dive into what what my thoughts are on Iran. Um, and what the hell are we doing? Like what's really going on? And there's all kinds of differing opinions, but the one thing that I think is infinitely interesting about this particular war and is there's not it hasn't been clearly communicated why we're there, right? And so you go back to 2003, that was my generation. I was supposed to graduate in 2003, dropped out of high school because I make good decisions like that. But I was supposed to graduate in 2003, and all my friends were the ones that, joined the military and went off and fought in Iraq and Afghanistan because of 9/11 and all the things. And we were told there was weapons of mass destruction over there, and turns out after 20 years there was no weapons of mass destruction. They did the mission accomplished banner across the naval ship, George W. After 3 weeks of being in Iraq, they said mission accomplished, and then they were like, "Just kidding, 20 more years of war." And so I have, my doubts and hesitations anytime that we're over in the Middle East operating. And what I wish we could just hear from the Trump administration is why we're over there. And you hear crazy stuff like, well, they chant death to America. Brian, did you know that they chant death to America? I'm like, yeah, I don't care. They don't like us. Okay. If not liking America means that we get to rain down bombs on you, and because they say death to America, that means that we get to rain down bombs on you and go and get into this kinetic war that is potentially looking like there may be boots on the ground coming soon. Just because they say death to America, well, to my knowledge, they don't have intercontinental ballistic missiles or nuclear capabilities, right? And so last summer we knocked out any enriching of uranium that they were doing, and then so the whole well, they're 2 weeks away from a bomb. They're 2 weeks away from a bomb. They've been 2 weeks away from a bomb since I was born. Okay, and so we continue to hear that. So they're not 2 weeks away from a bomb. They don't have intercontinental ballistic missiles. There was no imminent threat to the United States that Iran posed. So what is the reason that we're there? Why are we there? Why are we doing this? Why are we putting ourselves in this position? And I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't. I'm just asking, please, for the love of God, community because they're terrorists. They're terror. They do terror and terrorists. And they hate us because of freedom. Not a good reason. Okay, like I want a real reason. I've been told by people who are infinitely smarter than me, which is most people, that the reason that we're over there has to do with the BRIC system. And right now, the United States of America, the global currency that everything is based off is the US dollar. And if we ever lost the US dollar as the global currency that everything was done and all the oil trading and everything like that in the commodities market was based off of something other than the dollar, that would put us at a huge disadvantage economically. And that Russia and China and Iran and all these other states that they are opening up the Straits of Hormuz to be allowed to still get their oil. Those countries are trying to create an alternative um, currency, basically global currency, which would put us at an extreme, disadvantage from where we are now, and that it would be detrimental to America. If that's the case, just come out and explain that to us and say that's why we're doing it. I've got a 16-year-old son. I'll dive into this a little bit later, but, wars hit different when you have a son who's, approaching draft age, right? And again, Iraq and Afghanistan, no, they didn't draft, but Iraq and Afghanistan is not Iran. Iran has 90 million people. It's massive. I mean, it's just it's a different situation, okay? And so, um, those are just some kind of, top of mind thoughts as I'm kinda going into this thing to let you know where I'm coming from. So if it's about global currency, could you just please communicate that to us? I think the people deserve to know why we're over there. And you can literally break down who's in support of the war by who watches Fox News and who doesn't, right? And so like all the boomers that sit and watch Fox News are like, "Oh man, this is so good. They hate us because our freedom. They do terror. They do terror and they hate us because they're freedom, and we need to go over there and bomb them because they do terror and they hate us because they're freedom." And it's like, oh my gosh, I love my dad, but I can't talk to my dad about politics because I'm not arguing with my dad. I'm arguing with like Sean Hannity and Mark Levin. My dad has not formulated his own opinions of what's actually going on with independent research and like, alternative media and weighing out everything and really thinking it through. It's like, no, Sean Hannity said that we have to be there, right? And you remember Ukraine, we got to kill Putin, right? And so anyway, I feel like I'm rambling at this point. I guess that's what you're supposed to do on a news talk show is just ramble. I've got that part down. And I think we should go into our first floating break, and then we'll come back and we'll dive into this with a little bit more detail and less ranting. This is The Line with Andrew McLean, sans Andrew McLean, insert Brian Dawson. Better looking, a little fatter, but here it is. You can see that on the video feed if you go do it. We'll be back on the other side. Right, and we're back. The Line with Andrew McLean, even though it's without Andrew McLean, and it's featuring yours truly, Brian Dawson, CEO of 1819 News, the greatest news organization in the state of Alabama. I might be a bit biased on that, but I believe it. So, anyway, diving back in, we've got a caller who wants to enlighten me on why we're at war. We've got Tony. Tony, go ahead. You're on the air, sir.
Hey, Brian, I don't know about enlighten you, but I'll just go with what your theory and talking about you having a 16-year-old son that had, possibly sign up for the draft.
Yeah.
I had to sign up for the draft 47 years ago
Oof.
because of Iran.
Oof.
And I had to go through a whole series of steps and what the heck I'm doing this for. Why am I going to do this? Why must I have to possibly go and die for my country? And I seriously thought about it. And the founders of our country really made this, a great place to live. And with things currently, we've been threatened over and over and over by Iran for years and years and years. And this should have happened 47 years ago, not necessarily now, but this is the only president with any pelotas to take care of this. And it needed to be done. And that's just my opinion. So
Sure.
I think there's a lot more people that think like I do because of having to be registered to draft for that draft back then. I'm fortunate enough to still be alive, but I've been wondering when it was going to happen, when we were going to get bombs dropped on us because of that, and all this other stuff. So that's my take.
Yeah. Well, Tony, thank you. Thank you for your take, and I can certainly respond to that. Um, and I think they have been threatening us. They have there's always going to be someone somewhere that doesn't like us, and they're going to threaten us. And again, at the bottom line is with everything going on in our country right now, with our economy, with immigration, with our border problems, with the deindustrialization of the heartland, where all of our manufacturing has been shipped overseas, and then the jobs that were opened up that we were promised, we ended up taking people from third world hellholes and bringing them in here to fill those jobs because they work for less. And so there's so much that's going on in our country right now. Trump did not win this last election by promising war with Iran. He actually told us he wasn't going to get into a war with Iran. He said they couldn't have nukes, and they don't have nukes. He ran on basically an anti-interventionist, standpoint, kind of a paleo-conservative. Yes, we have a military. Yes, we're strong. What he's doing in Venezuela, what we're probably going to go do in Cuba, all of those things are worthwhile and valuable. That's our hemisphere. There's direct connection to what we're doing, and I just don't see Iran right now being the thing that we need to do. We were going into Minnesota and Minneapolis, and we were putting down a full-on coup of immigrants and state level officials, Keith Ellison and Tim Walz, Tampon Tim Walz. Okay, we went to war against that, and then the moment it became a little bit unpopular going into the midterms, he backed out and basically allowed them to beat him publicly. Okay, and the promise was to put those things down. The promises that got him elected was to put that type of stuff down in our own nation. Instead, he did not do that. It's unpopular right now. His advisors that he has surrounding him are saying, "Hey, that's not popular right now going into the midterms." But you know what would be super duper popular? A war in Iran. Okay, and then the CNN poll that says that we're at 100% support, 100% support for the war. The only people I know supporting this war is I've got a kind of a chubby Zionist friend and boomers. Okay, everybody else does not want to be in this war. Does not think it's. I was at a dinner the other night with people that didn't even know me, and they're like, "Are we allowed to not want to be in the war since Donald Trump wants to be in it?" And I'm like, "Yes, like we can have opinions." Now I support our president completely. I think he's amazing and he's an absolute godsend. But we have to be able to talk about this. And again, I wish the Trump administration would come and give some type of clear reason that we're there, um, other than they don't like us, right? They don't like us is not a good reason. And as it pertains to my son dying for our country, nothing would make me, like more proud than to have my son serve in a real capacity that actually has to do with American interests that isn't over in the Middle East. If my son got drafted to go into Minneapolis to round up Somalians to ship them back to the hellhole they came from, okay, so they could stop defrauding the government and creating quality learning centers. I would love nothing more than to see my son go do that. If we're actually going to go into Venezuela or go into Cuba and have, hemispheric dominance, Western hemispheric dominance under the Monroe Doctrine, I could see that, but we don't need to draft for that because we don't need that many soldiers to go do that, and that's our hemisphere. And so there's just not a direct, tangible reason to go into this war with Iran other than Fox News said so, and they don't like us. That's my whole point when I say they hate us for our freedom. They chant death to America. It's like that's fine. They can't reach us. They can't reach us. Okay. And what Trump has been doing up to this point is all of Iran's proxies that pop up and bomb our bases in the Middle East and pop up and spout off, smoke them, blow them off the freaking map. But to do what we've done in Iran is a big deal. And again, the biggest point to that is Trump did not run. He ran on no more new wars, no more new wars, no more new wars. He built this huge coalition from, Joe Rogan to Jerry Falwell. Okay. He had this massive coalition that he needed to be able to go in and win this election. And, and I'll say this, it's who he has in his ear. No man is better than the advisors that he has. And the 6 months leading up to him getting elected and then the 8 months following and about 6 months after the inauguration, so that 14-month period, Trump's inner advisory council, okay, the people that were closest to him, that he was listening to, that he had intimate conversations about what's going on, what is our vision, what are we going to do, was Charlie Kirk, Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, JD Vance, and Trump Jr. That was his inner circle of advisors, okay? And that's who was guiding him. Well, what's happened? Elon Musk and him had a falling out. Charlie Kirk got shot. They've labeled Tucker an anti-Semite and says he can't be near the president. JD Vance wants to be the next president, so he's not going to push it too terribly hard on Trump. And then Don Jr., whatever. And that inner circle of advisors has been replaced with Mark Levin and Randy Fine and Lindsey Graham. So what kind of advice do you think they're going to give him? We need to shoot Putin and we need to go. This is my Lindsey Graham impression, by the way. We need to kill Putin and we need to go in there to Iran. They're terrorists. They're national sponsors of terror and we got to stop the terror. We got to go in there. If we can do this. If we can do Iwo Jima, we can do this. Well, guess what? Lindsey Graham doesn't have children. Lindsey Graham wants to send your children to go die in some godforsaken desert in the Middle East. Lindsey Graham has no children. Well, that's convenient. He literally went on Fox News and invoked Iwo Jima yesterday. They said, well, what is it going to take this strategic point? I forget what the name of the strategic point. If we could take that strategic point, we could have peace in the Middle East once and for all for 2,000 years. If we could just take this peace, all the Muslims would just love the Jews and all the Jews would love the Muslims and all the Muslims that hate each other would love each other. We could just take this point and it's so worth it. And if we can do Iwo Jima, we can do this. Send in the 30,000 Marines to die so we can take this point so there can be peace. Or so you can get another check from Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. Which one is it, Lindsay? Why do you really want to do this? He never found a field for our sons to die in that he didn't love. Okay, that's Lindsey Graham. So heck with that dude because I'm on, air. I heck with that guy. Heckin'. There it is. I hear the little sound of music in my ear that tells me it's time for the bottom of the hour break. So we'll be back with Troy Carrico, military specialist, and he's going to give me the reason why he thinks we're there. All right, welcome back to the line with Andrew McLean, without Andrew McLean, with Brian Dawson. Coming back to talk about this war in Iran, why we're there, et cetera, et cetera. I've got my good buddy Troy Carrico who's on the line, um, and I'm gonna read this tweet, this X post. I still call them tweets. This X post from Joe Kent. He says step one in de-escalation, referring to the Iran war, and it looks like based off of what Trump is posting. So let me first read Trump's Truth Social. He said, I am pleased to report that the United States of America and the country of Iran have, over the last 2 days, very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East. Based on the tenor and tone of these in depth, detailed, and constructive conversations, which will continue throughout the week, I have instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for 5-day period, subject to the success of the ongoing meeting and discussions. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. And you know he's the one doing this because this thing's riddled with typos, which is hilarious because it's the freaking president of the United States and he's like still got True Social out and he's just thumbing it. All right, so this is what Joe Kent says. He says step one in de-escalation must be restraining the Israelis. Otherwise, all effort to negotiate will follow this pattern. President of the United States publicly announces de-escalation, what we just saw. Israel takes major strikes to destroy the negotiations, in turn weaken our ability to negotiate. The war escalates. This is the pattern that we saw. Even over the summer, when we bombed their nuclear facilities and Trump said, okay, we're done. Well, then Israel went over there and started bombing stuff again. And then, Trump was out by the helicopter and he starts dropping F bombs and S bombs, talking about Israel and how ticked off he was about them going and doing that. And so, for our greatest ally to continue to go over there and escalate when we're trying to de-escalate is problematic. And so I'm bringing on Troy Carrico, our illustrious all things military, tactics, strategy, special forces, operations, all of those things, who writes op-eds on these very subjects, as well as all things pertaining to veterans in the state of Alabama and abroad. Troy Carrico. Troy, thank you for taking the time to join.
Thanks for having me on again, Brian.
All right. So, what are your thoughts on, specifically Trump's attempt to de-escalate? Sounds like they're having some good conversations. And then what Joe Kent said about the
Yeah.
fact that the cycle seems to be every time we try to de-escalate, Israel tries to re-escalate.
Yeah, that's a problem, isn't it? But you know what's funny is it depends on what side of the camp you're sitting on. If you're a hawk, then you want to see this carried through to the end. And I got news for you. That's what Israel is. Israel is an existential threat for them. It's hard to have them both under tow and then just unleashing the cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war out of the IDF, which happens. And I think what we're seeing here is there is some shaping going on. And I believe that we have decimated the ISR, C4 ISR, which is a command, control, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance branch of what they have now. Have we mitigated the ballistic missile threat? But, out of the other side of the camp, we have them talking belligerently still. So we'll see how this shakes out. Knowing Trump, this is a 5-day window for opportunity to excel. What I mean is, if he can achieve the peace and get the results that he wants, which we'll talk about that in a minute, about the abandonment of enrichment of uranium in the nuclear weapons program, which they said they have no interest in doing. I don't see how we marry the two together yet, but yes, keeping Bibi on a shorter leash is definitely in the works. Besides, they get about 60% of their munitions from us. So
Yeah. So tell me, kind of your thoughts on what would be acceptable terms, and again, all of this, like there's always a level of smoke and mirrors. I want to give Trump all the credit that I possibly can. His foreign policy since he's come in 2016 to today has been pretty much flawless up until this point, and the jury's still out. We don't know what's happening here yet. So I'm not passing judgment on anything he's done up to this point. I'm just asking a lot of questions. His foreign policy has been flawless up to this point, and so I give him more credit than other people that would have us over in a circumstance and situation like this. But what would be amenable terms? And then is it that maybe we're not doing as well over there as we thought we were, and so now he's going to the negotiation table and trying to, agree, and then, like, are we just gonna go back to how things used to be? Like, we just did this entire bombing exercise, and then it's just gonna be the same thing, as it was? What are your thoughts?
There's no logical reality where going back to the table and just allowing status quo or the regime to stay in power and them to continue down the path of enrichment and proliferation of weapons and ballistic technology and so forth. Here's really what is at the crux. Um, we have You got to be careful with the liberal media's portrayal. Their hatred for Trump is so great, it's so manifest that every story that comes out of those garbage bills is telling you how we are not quite as strong as we appeared and we're weak. We have absolutely decimated their conventional forces and their ability to do much. Okay, but there's launchers here. There's launchers there. Listen, I hate saying this. War is nasty. It's a nasty business, and you're going to have some people. If you look at the total casualties, Brian, that's how many people have died. Now, some infrastructure's been damaged. That's okay. The thing is, we have decimated theirs, and I have a feeling that my world says this: the regime may stay in part, but it will be neutered, continue to be neutered up to the end by the Israeli IDF as they're doing selective hits on people, and they are. It's amazing what they've pulled off in terms of their intelligence and their targeting. I'm going to say this to your listeners, and this I don't want this to come across as crass, but I've
Not
spent a lot
you.
of time breaking bread with Shia and with Sunni. I spent 10 years of my life in the Middle East, and I'm talking living in there and breaking bread with Kuwaiti ministers of defense, Saudi ministers of defense, and undersecretaries, and princes and sultans. All these people, when I was working in DIA in the intelligence community for Gray Fox and for Great Skills, and I can tell you this: the term inshallah should sum up everything for you when you're dealing with the Arab, Muslim, particularly in terms of negotiations. Inshallah means God willing. If I say to you, hey, okay, we're going to have breakfast tomorrow, right, at 0900 at the cafe, inshallah, brother, they will say, meaning God willing, I may make it, I may not. And the terminology is very, very resplendent in the negotiation style of Arabs. They do not, their word and their commitment and their honor is not the same correlation as a Westerner's is. And I have grave, grave concerns about anything that they agree to and then maintaining. Of course, we can reserve the option to knock it out after that. But I think there needs to be a little bit more pressure applied. And I think that I doubt very seriously we're going to see Iran capitulate in 5 days. I think there's going to be strikes forthcoming on their infrastructure.
Well, that's I don't know if that's exciting or if that's good. I don't know. I'm processing this all as you speak. So when you hear kind of like, so again, I don't consider you a war hawk, but you're more hawkish than me. So and it's not even that you're hawkish. You have a real boots on the ground perspective of how this stuff works and who it is that we're dealing with. My thought is specifically going and getting into this size of a conflict. Trump had a mandate to go into Minneapolis and send all those people back. He had a mandate to go into anywhere where there was illegal aliens and send them all back. He had a mandate for that. He said no more new wars, and so he does not have a mandate to go in and do that. Doesn't mean he can't do it. He's the president. He can do whatever he wants. But I guess my point is, from the voter standpoint, he said no more new wars. Now we're in this war, and it leaves a lot of us scratching our heads that voted for him because he said no more new wars. There was not an imminent threat, as far as, and then Marco Rubio said, well, the reason we did this is because we knew that Israel was going to strike, and if Israel strikes, that means they would have started bombing U.S. bases. And so Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, basically said, hey, we did this because Israel did it, and we wanted to get out ahead of them. And so, do you think there was an imminent threat to the United States directly from Iran? And why do you think we got into this conflict?
Well, let's back up for a minute, and I'll answer that question towards the end about whether I thought there was an imminent threat, because I'm going to kind of put the cart before the horse and let you know. Look, this was planned. This was planned in Project 2025. This was one of the foreign policy issues that um, was never really contained in it, but it was talked in back doors. You just don't pull off the strikes we pulled off in a month of preparation. To the target decks were in place. We had coordinated with the Israelis. I can tell you, this is a joint international forces battle plan that's been deployed, and it didn't happen in a matter of a couple weeks. So I'm telling you that no matter what they're saying, we already had our eyes on this target and we were prepared to launch. That meeting at Quantico 6 months ago by Pete Hegseth was precisely about this kind of operation. It was shaping. This was a get your combat boots on and get in shape or get out, because we're going to go kick some ass. That's what we're getting ready to do. And that's what this is all about. It's the cultural shift of being nation destroyers, not nation builders, like we were under the compassionate conservative regime, and the failures in the military-industrial complex profiteering that was going on. This is about shaping and making definitive change. So to answer your question out of that context, Iran, there's no world where you can give me a scenario where it's safer with that regime in power and the technology they were pursuing and the assistance they were getting from North Koreans on the extension of their ballistic missile technology. There's no way you can tell me that this world would be safer had we not done this. And I would argue this for all your listeners out there. I have spent time. I know what the force disposition and the force constitution is of the IRGC, the MOIS, the Basij, all these different elements, the INA, the IRA, all these groups out there that are part of their governmental forces. We have mitigated 75%, in my estimates, of the world's problems in less than 1 week of strikes. That is the truth according to me, because I've been there, and I'm telling you, we have put them in a very, very precarious position, and their belligerence continues to befuddle me. But that's really the wild card. Are they going to capitulate and do what they ask? And if so, can we trust any of the veracity of what they're doing?
Yep. All right, well, we're going to hit a break. Stay with me on the other side of the break, Troy. We'll come back. This is The Line with Andrew McLean. Talk 99.5. We'll be back. All right, welcome back to the line with Brian Dawson filling in for Andrew McLean. Got Troy on the line, and we are deeply diving into the Iran war motivations and gyrations and all the things. Troy, I just want to ask you. So, if you and I have had some pretty in-depth conversations about Muslims in general. Okay, the Islamic religion that would be a cult, and their behavior. Going back from its inception and trying to kill Christians. Sometimes I get wedged being friends with Tucker Carlson and also being friends with Coach Tuberville. When I was interviewed by the New York Times, they tried to like put a wedge between me because Tuberville's very outspoken against Islam, and then people try and paint Tucker as being sympathetic to Islam. And I don't think Tucker is sympathetic to Islam in the sense of them being in the West. He doesn't like them being in Europe. He does not like them necessarily coming into America. So from an immigration standpoint, I think everyone agrees that they're a problem. But from a foreign policy standpoint, it's like, well, just let Muslims be Muslims in Muslim countries. So even if we go into Iran and we pull all this off, I think Muslims are going to keep Musliming. What do you think?
Well, you bring up a good point. No matter what happens in any scenario, the outcome of this fight in Iran, you're going to see a uptick of Shia fundamentalism as a result of strikebacks like we did in Iraq by the Sunni militias and some of the Shia militias there. Yeah. So to answer that, yes, and you know how I feel. I'm 100% supporter of Tommy Tuberville. I think he doesn't go far enough. I believe there should be forcible removement from this republic. There is nowhere anybody that understands what Islam's edict is, that it can peacefully coexist inside a constitutional republic, particularly with the majority of Christians and Jews here. There's no way. So that might come across as harsh, but that's the reality of the world. They have only one dialect they understand, Brian Dawson, and that is the sword, the power of the sword. That's how they operate.
Yep. So you got to give it to them. And on that note, and I don't want to transition. I've got in the next hour, I'm going to be bringing on Ernie Yarbrough to talk about immigration and his Lake and Riley Act. But it's a crazy thing to watch. And one of the other problems that I have with a lot of what we do in the Middle East, and again, there's no Muslim sympathy for me, buddy. I read my children stories of Duke Godfrey of Bouillon, who sold. He was a French noble who sold everything in 1095 and went on the first crusade and built up an army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and they lost something like 20 something men per mile they traveled was how it averages out. And everyone's like, oh, it's just a bunch of white people who are just going to conquer Muslim lands. It's like, no, we were going to retake historic Christian lands that were overran by Muslims who were putting Christians into sex
Amen.
slavery and all this other stuff. And Duke Godfrey led the first crusade, and he went back and freed Antioch and all these other historic Christian cities from the slavery and bondage that Christians were under. And he slaughtered Muslims by the thousands. And then he went into Jerusalem, which was overtaken by Muslims. And he was the first one to resack Jerusalem. And he takes back Jerusalem for Christ and Christians, because anyway, we'll get into, that the Holy Land and who's supposed to be there and all this other stuff. But he retakes Jerusalem. And they said they want to call him King of Jerusalem. And he said, no, there's only one King of Jerusalem, and that's Jesus, but you can call me Defender of the Holy Sepulchre, right? And so no love lost on me with what's going on over there, but I like them over there. Like I like them over. Like if we're gonna have them, they need to be over there, not over here. And one of the problems that I see when we get into these Middle Eastern conflicts is that we destabilize the region and they become, refugees here.
Amen. And oh my goodness, we could spend hours talking on the Crusades. Almeric the First, one of the greatest of the leaders, but more importantly, one of my favorite quotes from like being a defender of the Holy Church of the Sepulchre was Baldwin II when they went to crown him, and he said, he took off the crown. He said, "How can I wear a crown of gold when my master wore one of thorns?"
Mm.
And just a powerful, powerful quote. But back to what you're saying. Look, we have a problem and whether people want to admit it or not. And I know that 1819 News has been at the forefront exposing the parochial Islamic school that was going to be founded there in the Birmingham area, and they got pushed out. They are a predatory group religion, and I've said this before. There are individual Muslims that I know that are not very devout, and they're not really a threat. The problem is this. They have allowed their religion to be hijacked by a fundamentalist group that started in 1960s under the Muslim Brotherhood, and they've allowed it to continue to grow, fester, and they no longer can control their own members.
All right,
Thus,
Troy.
in the absence of their control, we must control them.
We're at the top of the break. Troy Carrico, thank you so much. You guys can find him at 1819news.com. We'll be back.